Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Way back in the mists of history, back in the primordial days of 2013, I was filled with enough salt for about, 5 Big Macs. And back in those days, well, I was, shall we say, less than charitable to the video game AVP 2010. I called it a COD clone and a failure. But now, I'm on a low-sodium diet, and thus, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take another look at AVP 2010 and see if it is still bad in the space year 2021. Since today, we are taking a look at what is effectively the last Aliens vs. Predator first-person shooter, some context is in order. The Alien vs. Predator first-person shooters started way back in the early 90s with the Alien vs. Predator game released on the Atari Jaguar in 1994. This game was developed by Rebellion and was, to say the least, an eye-opening game. Look at these graphics, and remember, 1994. You certainly couldn't get these graphics on the Super Nintendo, and you definitely couldn't get these on the Sega Genesis. The gameplay itself is old, but not necessarily unplayable. The game is certainly a lot slower, running at only about 15 frames per second, and the controls, while a bit clunky, are still playable. This game right here set the stage for all future Aliens vs. Predator first-person shooters to come. All the things you would see in those later games are right bloody here on a early 90s console. The Jag had some muscles. You can play as the Marine, you can play as the Predator, and you can play as the Xenomorph, and the gameplay is very much reminiscent of what would come later, only a bit more primitive. To say the least, this game has, in many respects, stood the test of time, and yes, we'll be taking a look at this later on in the year. Aliens vs. Predator Classic 2000. Hey, they gotta do something to differentiate it from the other AVP named games. This was the very first Aliens vs. Predator first-person shooter that I ever played. Prior to this, I'd played the Super Nintendo game and the arcade game. This game right here blew me away back in the early 2000s. The graphics might look aged now, although the level textures still look damn good 21 years later. Hey, this game can drink. The gameplay has not aged a whit, whatever that is. Like the previous game, you can choose between the Colonial Marine, the Predator, and the Xenomorph. The Colonial Marine is at his squishiest here. This game type is the twitchiest of the lot, as you can die in just a very few hits, and the Xenomorphs are at their very quickest. This makes for a game pretty much like no other. You can defend yourself quite easily, but you have to have a quick trigger finger to survive. The Predator can take more hits than the Marine, and can one-hit kill a Xeno with a charged-up wrist blade shot, but you now face humans that can kill you from afar. The Xeno is the most confusing, as the levels have numerous paths to traverse, and the gameplay is blisteringly fast, and you have to use stealth and aggression alike to survive. Then you had the multiplayer. In short, it was my favorite multiplayer of all time, and I logged countless hours playing it. You had your typical shooty-shooty, but play as Predators, and the game devolves into Tron Deadly Discs. For both myself and the fanbase, all other AVP games will be judged by the quality set by this game. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, this will also be getting a retrospective this year as well. AVP 2 was a sequel that fixed a few things. Most notably, it gave us a really good narrative and made the gameplay a bit more complex. But it drastically reduced the speed at which the game is played, and made it so that you could take a few more hits as the Marine. The Predator got some new weapons, and was pitted against some enemies that could drain you of health in seconds. And the Xeno got the most expansion of all. You now got to play through the entire life cycle of the Xenomorph, which made for some great stealth segments. All told, this game was slightly better than AVP 1, but upon reflection, I still think AVP 1 is the superior game due to the sheer panic-inducing nature of the Xenomorph's speed. One of the biggest points of contention I had with AVP 2010 was the gameplay. I said it had been bitten by the foul COD monster. Well, it hasn't been codified in any way, shape, or form, and instead has simply been broed. The Colonial Marine has the longest of the campaigns, and we can tell just from our HUD that we have no COD here. You have a health bar, and it does not regenerate on its own. There may be only 2 weapon slots, but then again, Halo got away with that back in 2001. My god, I'm old. And unlike in Halo, you can keep your goddamn pistol.
However, unlike in Halo, there is no explanation for as to why Colonial Marines, squishy humies, can block an enemy that can cut through steel.
I guess the entire Colonial Marine Corps, even the Chick Marines, have been popping roids like Pez, cause every squishy Humie can block Xenos and Predators for some reason. Remember, the Xenos and Aliens were able to smash through bulletproof glass, and they have been consistently portrayed as being able to claw through high carbon steel like it was butter. The Predator at the very least should break every bloody block a Colonial Marine tries to use.
Seriously, ladies and gentlemen, I can hold up a PTR in front of a forklift to try to block it, and you know what? I'm still gonna get squished.
The Pred should theoretically have the punch force to break bone if he can connect, but let's face it, it makes the overall gameplay that much more complex and slightly more fun, as it makes the melee system more than just see alien, miss, then die. And hey, we can also riff it as being silly, so there is that. And in my headcanon, all the Marines are roided to the gills, and the male Marines have infinitesimally small testicles, and the female Marines have pecs Arnold would envy. The health system is the 2010s half standard of shards. You have 3 hit points to death, and you can carry 3 roid needles to regain health. This gives the game a good degree of challenge because you cannot just run off to heal.
The best and most important aspect of the gameplay is the fact that the game keeps the Xenomorph a legitimate threat throughout the entire game.
The combat in this game is still really bloody fun, and the Xenomorphs are still terror-inducing despite the fact that the Colonial Marine you are controlling is the slowest of all the non-Jaguar Marines. He feels like he is all muscle and no cardio. You can sprint for like 2 seconds, and this helps get your roided ass moving and can keep you alive, because while the Xenos are also on the roids, they can still move fast enough to corner you and rip you to shreds. And your roid Marine can only take a very few hits before death, meaning that this game still nails what made AVP fun in the first place. The weapons for the game aren't all standard kit. You got your pulse rifle, it's still kick-ass. Smart gun still rocks, even though it makes you drop all but your pistol. Dude bro sacrifices testicles, and he can't at least carry a rifle in addition to his smart gun. You gotta get a better supplier, man.
It is often said that time makes fools of us all, and time certainly has made a fool of me. Back in 2013 and 2010, I scoffed at the very idea of a double-barrel pump-action shotgun. Well, I simply was not evolved enough to appreciate the most bro gun that ever broed it up, the double-barrel pump-action shotgun that is the DP-12.
2021, ladies and gentlemen. The double-barreled pump-action shotgun is a real thing now and has been for several years, and numerous companies manufacture the bloody things. What once was a mere bubba gun is now a bro gun. It's really silly, but in the game, it's useful, but still really bloody silly. The Colonial Marine Corps has a military-issue double-barrel pump-action mag-fed pistol grip shotgun. I get the feeling that Gecko 0445, aka Gecko 45's immortal android, must have been on the ordnance board that adopted that one. In addition to the foul Xeno, you also face Men of Steel, and they can shred you fast, so keep to cover and snipe from a distance. And the long-range rifle for this game is really bloody cool, as it gives you a little x-ray scope. This game even gives you bosses with health bars, no less. The bosses can be tough and are a great deal of fun. Like in the previous games, there are still some dark areas, and you get a flashlight and a bunch of flares. Alas, this enters the broad nature of the game. There just isn't enough of the game. It gets good, and then the level is over. It get good, and then the game's over. At the time this game was released, it was par for the course for the devs to make the levels short, sharp lessons in pain, and it worked to a point. My only 2021 complaint is that as good as the game gets, it's too bloody short. Let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, like the Jedi, every kid that was lucky enough to have a cool family that let them watch the Predator kick the crap out of Arnie wanted to be a Yachtja hunter.
You know, it's kind of like being a Jedi. Instead of, lopping off hands, you're lopping off heads.
The power, the grace, the elegance, all these things made the Yachtja Hunter something to be admired, if not for what he did, but for what he was. In the first 2 games, you were a ninja. You could make many a precision hit with your wrist blades. In fact, most playthroughs, that's all I used. Here, you are playing as Dark. He is a berserker predator that is equipped with 2 wrist blades. And like in AVP Extinction, you bash people about until they die. This worked well enough in an RTS, but here in first person, it's a bit disorienting, and it doesn't feel like you are cutting people up at all. Instead, it feels like you're just hitting people with dull, bloody blades. Wait a minute, considering the weapons you use in this game, these might not be wrist blades at all. Dark could actually be the Gecko 45 equivalent in the Yachtja species. These aren't wrist blades, these are cheap ones that he bought at the local mall for $5.99 a piece that are super tactical. Yes, even the name Dark. He's trying to be a tacta-bro. No wonder he's kind of a crap predator. The melee just feels too slow and sluggish, and the camera just jumps about all over the bloody place, making it hard to tell what you're bloody looking at. The fact that the Humies can block really must be emasculating for old Dark, but considering he is a skinny boy, one wonders
if he thinks he's so tacta-bro, and he studied so many tactical manuals from the Predator equivalent of Steven Seagal, and has drunk so many Steven Seagal energy drinks that he doesn't even need to work out.
The other weapons the Predator gets are not much better. The Plasma Caster takes forever to target, the Smart Disc just sounds too funny to be taken seriously, the Combi Stick is treated like a BFG, along with acting like the Hammer of Thor and returning to you for some reason after you throw it. The Predator is nerfed considerably from his earlier outings. You use health shards like the Marine, and as a Mall Ninja Predator, you can only take a few hits before succumbing to the ravages of 10mm. This makes the gameplay rather fun, as it means you have to be strategic when you're using the Bashy Bashy. You also get a one-hit kill move where you remove the skull from the spines of your enemies, but instead of tossing them away laughing like Sergeant Johnson, you instead put them into an off-screen sack for later display next to your Funko Pops. You can use a distract mechanic to stealth by enemies, but, well, enemies in this game have that Far Cry laser vision, so this is less useful than one might think. You can also target a super jump as well, and this, once again, is not quite as useful as one would wish.
Now, back in 2013, I mocked the game for its lack of having a hacking tool. Now, however, in the space year 2021, with the advent of Windows 10, however...
God damn it, you updated 2 days ago! It's time for some hacking. And some slashing. For anyone who has had PC issues, playing as the Pred and smashing PCs to hack them is incredibly cathartic. The gameplay for Mall Pred is almost really good, but sadly, due to rather sluggish and imprecise controls, half the time you feel like you're just floating through the fights. This doesn't ruin the gameplay for the Predator, but it does leave a little bit to be desired. What also leaves a little bit to be desired is the length. Just when you finally master the floaty controls and really start having fun, boom! Final boss fight. A boss fight that is the best in the game, and one we will take a close look at later in the video. Let us give thanks to the mighty Primarch Rubute Gilliman and his great space dragon of great justice that we didn't have to face the sexy Xenomorph 6 in Alien Isolation. Otherwise, oh, that game would be nigh unplayable. Yeah, in all the Alien vs. Predator games, Xenos could see in the dark and would have been able to spot old Rip no matter how many smoke bombs she threw. This game forgoes the Xenomorph lifecycle and puts you right in control of a Rule 34 Xenomorph named Six, cause Six sounds both feminine and sexy. Those filthy degenerates. Despite sexy being a melee character, the controls are a lot tighter, giggity, and more responsive, meaning that you will be able to hack and slash like an orc on Red Bull mixed with Balls Guana, or your usual QuakeCon attendant. You can still climb on walls in this game, but it's a bit more finicky and sluggish, since now you have to toggle it, and you cannot just go through a vent, instead you have to toggle that too. This means that you have 75% good control with 25% finicky. However, this makes a degree of sense, since these levels are more bro than the previous games, and while finicky, these toggles make it easier to keep your bearings compared to previous games. Like the Pred, you have a one-hit kill move that is more useful here, here due to the fact that the Xenomorph can tank substantially less damage than the Mole Ninja Pred. So there will be times when a quick one-hit kill will be all that stands between you and a messy death. The execution moves for both the Pred and Xeno do leave you vulnerable, so be sure to only deploy them when no other troops are around to kill you for your trouble. Like the other two campaigns, this game mode is criminally short and will always leave you wanting more. All three campaigns, while not as amazing as the previous AVP games, are still pretty bloody good, and that's because they don't rely on the same old gameplay level after level. There's usually something in each campaign that spices things up a little bit. The Predator campaign has the most notable bit of spice, and that is puzzles. You have to solve a few fairly basic puzzles, but they're there and they make you think for about 5 seconds. But at least they tried. At least they put in the effort to make things stand out. COD clones and COD games in many respects just have shooty shooty shoot shoot, turret section, cutscene, shooty shooty shoot shoot. AVP here is just like its predecessors in giving you the player something new to do each level, and that is something to be commended.
For a game from 2010, AVP has more than held up over the years. In fact, it even put some games that came out a few years later to shame.
Just look at these graphics. Yeah, back when I had enough salt for one small order of Mickey D's Freedom Fries, I complained about how the game was all graphics and no substance. Now that I have only enough salt for one fry, I can appreciate the graphics for their sheer excellence. This runs the Unreal 3 engine, and it shows. Unreal 3 engine games generally stand the test of time. The game is dark, as any good Aliens vs Predator game should be, and thus the older textures look far better than they might otherwise. The lighting in this game is on par with something on the id Tech 4 engine, and the game actually does get dark enough to require the shoulder lamp, but I never use the flares unless I dropped one accidentally. The Colonial Marines themselves look excellent, have a bunch of really nice details on them. The Preds are nicely rendered, although dark is way too skinny. Eat a burger for the Black Warrior's sake. But then again, he might go on the other extreme and, well, his sprint speed's gonna get even slower and shorter. Anyway, the weapon models are groin-grabbingly transcendent, and the counter counts down on the pulse rifle. The Xenos look amazing as well, and their animations work for the most part, although their tails are still a little glitchy. The animations for the game look pretty damn good, and the Xenos are the most fluid they have ever been. And this is one of those few epic first-person shooters where you can see your feet, thus helping with immersion. The game also has a sense of epicness to it. Just look at the size of some of these structures. Yeah, the levels are shorter than I would like, but what you get is some really good stuff. And it's never just hallways, cutscenes, and arenas. The game runs quite well on a, my god I'm old, modern PC. Just make sure when you run the Steam version that you use the DirectX 11 renderer. By using DirectX 11, I was able to run the game in 2K maxed out at 60 FPS. I surprisingly got less texture pop-in 2K than with other games of this, I'm old, vintage. The game looks really bloody good in 2K, and I cannot stress that enough. The game might place at a, shall we say, B- level, but these graphics are an A+ in my book, thus giving this game a B+ overall.
Grading averages. Is there any better concept?
The footage you are seeing in this review is from my live stream, and due to the internet connection, I had to downscale it to 720p 30 FPS, so the game will look far better when one plays it on their own machine. Alas, it will not have the mighty visage of the general watching over you, but the greater graphical fidelity is worthy of the sacrifice. I had 0 crashes to desktop or random slowdown, and the game controlled quite well with an old Xbox 360 controller, with all the buttons being mapped intelligently, and you can swap from controller to keyboard on the fly. The PC port's quality requires a grouping rating. What's a grouping rating, you might ask? Well, when you shoot for groups, what you do is you take your best group of 5 and throw away the flyer. So, this is a good 5-shot group. We just have to throw away the flyer that is that horrible sound glitch. The sound design is perfectly average. The Xenomorph does not have its original sound effects, but instead has this new Xenomorph growl that sounds a lot like the Velociraptors from Jurassic Park. With that in mind though, they still sound fairly scary in the dark areas. The pulse rifle gets the proper sounds, as does the smart gun, so we can thank the Omnisire for that. There is a sound glitch that will blow your eardrums out if you were not prepared for it. Way to go, Rebellion! The voice acting is pretty average. You have the immortal Lance Hendrickson being awesome as always, and he does a good job playing the villain. The other voice actors are pretty average. Your sweet hottie in the Marine campaign tries to impersonate Vasquez and does a pretty weak job of it, as her Spanish accent is about as good as mine. The general Marine banter is also poorly acted, and we need not even discuss the audio log audio quality, because I have to say it would have made much more sense for the developers to stick with text logs. The music for the Aliens vs. Predator games were never really stand out to begin with, as most of the time you were too focused on survival to listen to any tunes. Here, the score is your typical 2010s orchestral movie sort of thing. But unlike in other games of this era, this music actually works and helps convey the emotion of certain scenes when the voice actors cannot be bothered to do so. It's not a soundtrack that you will listen to outside of the game, but it makes the game that much more exciting. The story for AVP 2010 is in totality a B-. If you're using a numerical grading scale, it's a 80. The kind of grade one celebrates when one thinks they're going to fail, and fail bad. The story is just on the right side of average despite being very, very bro. The characters, such as they are pretty bloody basic. You have 3 silent protagonists that get little in the way of characterization. The plots for the Marine, Predator, and Xenomorph all take place concurrently with one another, and it's kind of cool to show up in an area where you blew something up in a previous campaign. Like AVP2, it gives each of the protagonists a personal stake in their campaign. The Marine has to rescue a comrade, the Predator has to restore some honor, and the Xenomorph has to try and save the Queen. Each give the player something to accomplish that is more than just run forward and slay and pray. Really, it could have been a good pseudo-remake if the bloody thing had been 3 hours longer and not so compressed. Let's first take a look at the Marine campaign. The Marine campaign has by far the second most epic opener of all the AVP games.
What the hell? Unknown vessel detected. Shit, it just appeared out of nowhere. Molly, you reading this? Shit.
You better believe AVP Arcade still reigns supreme.
The Bro Marines are on their way to investigate a planet that has gone dark. Seems pedestrian enough, right? Then wham! Here comes the Yachtja space wagon of epic justice. It one-shots a colonial marine starship named the Marlowe. I get the feeling that the devs behind Alien Isolation named the Crooked Shipmaster this as a tribute to this game. The Marlowe gets blasted and the Marines have to land their dropship, and you, the rookie, he gets no other name, has something happen to him that knocks him out. So the devs don't have to pay for any more voice actors. I mean, isolate you from your squad mates, there we go. For dramatic tension, you wake up after helping keep the budget down, and it's now time to enter the Invisible Plot Railroad. And it's by far the worst kind. You, the player, have no real direction in the game, and the rookie has no real agency. Ugh. Of his own. Yeah, I know that word is dumb, but it's true. You are no mighty hero who is in control of his destiny. Rather, you are just a roided up rook just stumbling from one plot detail to another, and you just so happen to be here and there when the plot needs you to be. In short, it's the average bro plot. At least it's not too insulting to the player, and at least it's in keeping with the Alien style, even if it's basically an asylum film plot. So Roid Rook has to figure out what to do and where to go. Thankfully, Tequila helps him out.
No. This game, it's just not good enough to deserve tequila. Also, it's not bad enough to deserve tequila either.
She is a complete and total Vasquez clone that points out the obvious and generally just orders you around. You do your typical bro things, you help out NPCs that die, you rock off with a foul xenomorph queen that does not fight back, and instead you have to keep hitting a switch while fighting off waves and waves of enemies. If not for the final boss, I would say that the queen fight was broed, but it was worth it, and I'm glad they gave the Bro Marine a queen battle in addition to a final boss.
And to be fair, I suppose in AVP 1 on PC, you didn't actually fight the queen and had to enviro kill her.
Alas, there is no burgeoning friendship between the Rook and Tequila, because Rook is just too nervous to talk to his waifu. All he does is stand there with that anime red blush under his nose, and then Tequila gets a boyfriend named Fred Hugger, and thus the plot becomes Rescue Tequila. You team up with a glorious Mother Russian android, and she helps you finally get Tequila to a biobed, but alas, you need higher stakes than rescue a space babe. And so a wild asshole appears in the guise of Charles Bishop Wayland. This makes zero sense, since there was no tech in 2004 to back up his memory engrams, and thus there should be no android bishops walking around twirling their mustaches. Because seriously, why would his company want to make an android that closely approximates their boss? He didn't have a cult of personality, but I guess Wayland or Yutani could have resurrected his spirit from the dead and put that in an android body. That explains why he's a shitty boss that wastes resources and is really petty, because the pettiness is what makes him the main villain for Roid Rook here, because, well, he decides for no real reason whatsoever to withhold the anti-facehugger treatment from Rook's waifu. Since Roid Rook wants some of that sweet tequila, despite having infinitesimally small testicles, he sets out to lay the demonic android low. The battle with Wayland is pretty fun. He is a tough bastardo to take down, and it's satisfying to wipe that superior smirk off his face. As satisfying as the boss fight is, I don't think that Wayland should have been Rook's final boss, as Rook has less emotional connection to Wayland. Wayland is not really his nemesis. Instead, Wayland is more of a nemesis to the Xenomorph character, and to a lesser extent, Dark. He just twirls his mustache and fucks with you and your waifu in this campaign, and I would have preferred a different villain for Rookie. I think it would have been epic if you had to face down a Predator that wiped out your squad, and have that self-same Predator have been the bastard that slotted the Marlowe as well. You could have even had him capture Tequila as bait. This would have given you a greater emotional impetus for the boss fight, and then Wayland could have been the final boss for the Xenomorph. Ah well, at the end of the game, the planet is set to be exploded, and you and Tequila make it onto a dropship and escape. And the game leaves a most depressing sequel hook.
They find the location of the Xenomorph homeworld, setting up a possibly AVP-ized aliens Earth hive. Unfortunately, all we got was Colonial Marines.
You play the role of Dark. He is a former mall ninja that decided to go the distance. He figures he can be the greatest predator of all time. Thankfully, the competency standards are really low at this point of time in the Predator Empire, and thus all he has to do is kill a few xenomorphs with his cheap Chinese stainless steel dual wrist blades. Also, xenomorphs in this game are called serpents by the predators, which is really bloody stupid because they neither look nor act like fucking snakes. And the predators already had a name for them.
Hard meat. Come on, it'd be great. It's not funny at all.
The humans were called soft meat. Must have been from all the roids. So, all you gotta do in this current era of predator society is kill a couple Xenos to become elite. Originally, just to graduate from unblooded to blooded, you had to kill a few Xenos and then work for years just to become regular blooded. Dashin Day from the AVP novel is a blooded trainer, and he pines for the day when he can ditch the teenagers with attitude and get on a ship with other blooded hunters. Furthermore, in Predator society, it was said that hunting humans was a great honor, as humans actually could fight back with tactics and weapons, whereas Xenomorphs cannot. So our mall ninja graduates from Youngblood, aka high school graduate, to the goddamn Navy SEALs, Dark here must have a really highly placed daddy, or as the Pred Society is matriarchal, mommy, to get such a major assignment. After many years of waiting, we are treated to talking predators, and it's as cool as it sounds. Alas, you are a silent protagonist, but then again, if he actually did talk, he'd just be saying actually all the time. This campaign takes place concurrently with the Marine campaign, as it's Dark's ship that blasts the Marlow, and it's one of Dark's buddies that you, in the Marine campaign, turn into lunch meat. You get charged with destroying the tech of some dead Mall Ninja Youngbloods. Why they were on a mission to a hostile planet alone is never explained, since Youngbloods are literally on the lowest tier of Yachtja society, and thus get stuck with all the boring scut work. It's nice and convenient that Dark was able to get to this planet in time to do something with the bodies. But enough about that, it's time to get to killing. The game has Wayland do some trash talking, and he tries to capture Dark, but unlike General Rykov in AVP 2, he forgets to bolt down an obvious panel and you escape. Quite easily, I might add. And he also forgot his EMP grenades as well, but he is not a steel-hard mother Russian, and so that's to be expected. You eventually get the mission to blow up the Temple of the First Hunter, even though you could just as easily slaughter the Humies and Xenos and clean it out and keep it there for your cultural preservation, but the Preds go hard or go home, I guess. Dark here also shows just how much privilege he has, as he gets a mythic rare mask of the Black Lotus, the first Predator mask of all time. We also see a really epic scene of some Predators hauling a queen away, and it's something straight out of the original AVP comic. Your final boss for the game is the Pred Alien. The Predalien concept varies from work to work. In its first appearance, it was an epic tier opponent that required a Pred and a Marine to team up to defeat it. In the first AVP game, it's a Genosplice abomination that is killed in 2 hits with the spear gun. In AVP 2, you slaughter them easily with your spear gun, and in AVP Extinction, it's a slightly better general infantry unit. Here, the fight against the Predalien is a sweet callback to AVP 1 PC, and it's treated like an abomination, and you fight it in a temple filled with molten magma. It's an amazing fight, but for the Predalien dance. You slay the dancing fiend and rig the temple to blue, thus intersecting with the Marine ending and being responsible for making Rookroyd have to rush to the exit to not get blowed up. After escaping the planet, you head out in search of other prey. The Xenomorph campaign really gives the Xenomorph character a lot of character. I would not say it was the best Xenomorph campaign in the entirety of the AVP first-person shooter franchise, but it's definitely top bloody tier nonetheless. It starts out hardcore. Oh, that's gotta hurt. In other Alien campaigns, you were just the Midnight Black Beast doing the best it can to slaughter the human, and on rare occasions, the Yachtja, and put the fear of the Queen into everything. Here, you start up locked up in one of Wayland's science dungeons. Also, gotta love the font on the number 6. That is something straight out of Nightmare Asylum. Your first duty is to break out of containment. Your next task is to break out your foul Xeno buddies as well, and finally rescue the Queen. All the while, Wayland is pursuing you. It's a unique spin on the Xenomorph concept. Instead of you just killing everything cause you a boss, you are a legitimately sympathetic character since the Humies did hold you captive after all. This campaign begins slightly before the Marine and Predator campaigns and fills in all the missing gaps in the story just like AVP 2, just a lot more streamlined. You sadly never succeed in your mission to rescue the Queen, as wouldn't you know it, that roided up bastard the Rookie takes her out just as you get near, in a really epic scene I might add. Sadly, the final boss is the most annoying and narratively boring. You take on 2 Predators with 1 tail spike. They didn't really do anything to Six herself, and they feel really tacked on. You fight them in the same boss arena that appears in the other 2 campaigns, and the Xenomorph controls are not really tailored to quickly jumping on these columns so that you can attack the Preds, meaning the boss fight gets boring and tedious fast. The end of the game shows that the budget was pretty much gone. Instead of an epic rock-off, you watch a cutscene where Six is able to escape on a ship before the planet blows. She then kills everyone on this random ship and then transforms into a queen Fade to black, the end.
If only this game had a bloody budget like that accursed Borderlands.
Imagine, lads and lasses, a level where you play as a xenomorph queen on a rampage. Imagine smashing up power loaders with wild abandon, and then finally fighting your way to Wayland Prime, and finally putting paid to the bastard once and for all. Alien vs. Predator 2010, or 3, or whatever the hell you want to call it, is an adequate game. It's not as good as the previous games in many respects, but you can tell that the devs respected what had come before and kept the broing of the game to an absolute minimum. Everything in the game works like it should, and you only really feel disappointed when the game ends too quickly, leaving you wanting, oh, so much more. Even when compared to those titans of yesteryear, the game still holds up as a fun, if brief, gaming experience, and if this is to be the last Aliens vs. Predator first-person shooter ever, then at least it ensured that the franchise went out with a bang.
You know, I'm glad I decided to cut all this sodium out of my diet and finally allow myself to love AVP 2010. This was one of the many games that got lumped in with COD crap back in the mid-2000s. Like, shall we say, a certain game called Wolfenstein? But for that, you will simply have to exercise a little patience. Because for now, I am the mighty GeneralLotz, wishing you good, low sodium, and good AVP Arcade, or whatever makes you happy.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and if you can, please consider supporting me on Patreon so that I can continue bringing you this great content.